Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, A Zuni Life. This book is written by Virgil Wayako. The subtitle is A Pueblo Indian in Two Worlds. I'm going to preface this video by saying that in this video, I will be using the word Indian a lot to describe Puebloans and Native Americans because that is the word that the author uses to describe himself and his people. This book was published in 1998, but in the time since, there's been a greater push to do away with the word Indian and to favor Native American or even Indigenous American, or preferably referring to people by their tribes. That being said, I'll discuss in this video where I found this book and why this book is sentimental to me, as well as a few aspects of this book that I really liked, or found educational, or both. So firstly, I found this book at the El Morro National Monument Visitor Center in, I think it was June or July of 2021. I purchased it for $20, $19.95 without tax, so approximately $20. And for those that don't know, El Morro National Monument is located near Rama, New Mexico, which is a town that borders the El Malpais National Monument, El Morro National Monument, and the Zuni Pueblo. A lot of that land out there is reservation, whether Zuni or Navajo, but also a lot of it is privately owned ranches that are part of the state of New Mexico rather than the reservation. That is part of the state of New Mexico that is more often colloquially called checkerboard country. So this book is a first-person perspective about what it means to have been Zuni from the 1920s through to the modern era. Virgil Wayako provides a first-hand account of the Indian schools in Albuquerque and Santa Fe and the effect it had on his life and his mentality, and the effect it had on other people that he knew. This is a dark part of American history because he talks about the way he would get beaten for speaking his native language. He is Zuni, which is a language isolate, and a very small pueblo. Nowadays, the current population is only about 10,000 Zuni members of that tribe. So when he was young, that was a much smaller population. And he gives an example here. He says, in 1936, when I was in the 6th grade, I heard about the Indian school in Albuquerque, one of the BIA boarding schools, and I thought about having a different lifestyle and learning new things in a big city. My principal, Mrs. Gonzalez, sent in an application for me, and my parents agreed to let me go, accepting my desires to broaden my life. These were the good reasons. They were true enough, but there were other more compelling ones. Girls had begun paying attention to me. In Zuni, boys and girls grow up separately, boys running together and girls staying with their mothers as children. I'd come to think that girls might be interesting long before they had paid any attention to me, but it took me some time to overcome my early years when I'd been undersized. Recently, however, I'd noticed the girls looking at me and looking away, giggling when I caught them at it. There are no secrets in Zuni. Soon everyone would notice and the teasing would begin. I had lots of aunts and uncles who would be most unhelpful in any attempt I made to make room in my life for girls. I knew no one in Albuquerque. It would make the whole process much easier. So it continues like that for a few pages, but then, in a funny way, he says, I haven't forgotten my wild days, but to avoid embarrassment to my family, some of whom would be shocked to know how an old man's mind runs, I'm not going to talk about women. Furthermore, since I didn't marry Laura until I was in my 30s, there may be stories even she hasn't heard about my romantic adventures. People like to tell her what they know about me, for she has the best laugh in Zuni. I think what she likes best is laughing at me. I don't need to make it any easier for her. So this is... It really does feel like the author is sitting down in a chair next to the reader, and as you're reading, you're hearing very honest thoughts by this author. There's no filter, there's no flowery language. It is very plain, and it is very, very directly his manner of speaking written down, which also kind of makes sense because if you caught it during that glimpse of the book's cover at the start, in small text on the cover it says transcribed and edited by J.A. Jones, which is to say that by the look of it, this book was Virgil speaking with a friend and his friend transcribing everything that he heard. So instead of it just being a very carefully and methodically written out story, it is a lot of storytelling going on in this book. Like a lot of other books, it also includes some pictures in the middle, and there's a picture, I'm going to have my hand indicating it, of Virgil and his wife, and that's at the top of the right page here. So the caption says Virgil and Laura Wyaco, 1972. Now, he includes pictures of his children and their families in the book as well. And this amazing picture, the caption reads, Esther Takala, Virgil's mother, photo taken 1978. And then the last set of pictures, Candy Wyaco and fiance Cliff Seipert, 1996, and Virgil's daughter Pamela and her husband Steve Moore, grandsons Chad and Chase, Atlanta, Georgia, 1995. Another important part of this book is the community development aspect of his life. Virgil is, in a way that I really admire, interested in education, but not just in education, but uplifting his people. He wants not just the best for Zuni, but the best for the Puebloan Indians as a whole. And so he ends up running for political office, and he ends up as postmaster at one point in time. He ends up on an educational school board for a different period of time. He is interested in furthering the education of his Puebloan people. And it's a really fascinating story. And he opens chapter 10 in a kind of funny way. I retired from the post office at about the same time I finished my term as councilman. The federal pension that seemed so unimportant 40 years ago makes my life comfortable now. Things I looked forward to doing for years now fill my life. I have an 11-acre field in which I grow corn, though young relatives do most of the work. We have 2 acres in the backyard in which my wife and I keep a garden, much of it in sweet corn and chili. My wife insists on growing onions, carrots, cabbages, radishes, and tomatoes as well, like the traditional Zuni woman she is. I do a lot of weeding. I also work around the house, washing dishes, doing laundry, cleaning, picking up the yard, feeding the dogs and the turkeys, and even cooking when she comes in tired from her work in Gallup. She's a better cook than I am, though. And this is part of the introspective portion of his life and the writing. He says, When I was young, I was told that I should pick the best from both cultures, the white man's and the Indian's, and make them part of my life. Thinking back to when I was a small boy, I can see that some things available to whites are worth having. My indoor plumbing, central heating, electricity, television, clothes, and cars are all from the white world. I would not willingly do without them. Other, less material aspects of white culture, such as modern medicine and literacy, are even more important to me. On the other hand, if I never heard white music again, I would not miss it. There are other things. It would not be right to grieve because I was never chosen to become a personator of the gods, but I know I have missed much. I have come to understand that the violent acts I have witnessed and even done make me unfit. A god personator must be able to hold nothing in his mind but the highest and holiest of thoughts. My mind was burned with too many wrong images. My Zuni friends say that I make too much of the distinction between the sacred and everyday worlds. Maybe it's because I've lived so much surrounded by white culture. The Zuni tend to see everything as sacred. When they see differences, it is between those things that can be approached without risk, such as water and corn, and those that need special preparation and care, like sacred masks. In his later years, he feels like it almost reads like he feels that he has kind of become too white, but he also doesn't live needing English often. A lot of his comments indicate that he can go weeks without even thinking in English and only thinking in Zuni, his native tongue, because the people around him speak Zuni as a first language as well. He also goes into the history of the Zuni, he goes into the culture of the Zuni, and he makes some kind of funnier statements. Green chile and red chile are major parts of Puebloan and New Mexican life in general. But he mentions that when he first enlisted in the army during World War II, it was the first time he had gone without eating chile on a regular basis. And so I found that kind of funny as a New Mexican because I know I put a green chili on all of my lunches. I go to work, I bring a bologna and cheese sandwich, and in the middle I put a green chili. So I know how important having that staple crop is to myself. But it was funny to hear it so plainly put that he just didn't have it and that the food just didn't taste as good as he wished it did. So it's a very interesting and educational story, very passionately told story about what it's like to be Zuni in the modern era and what he did to improve his people's station in life in the greater cultural sense, but also what he did as a friend for people. So it's a fantastic book. It is short, it is only 142 pages. The actual meat of the text is only 104 pages, but, and this was another smaller text part of the cover, historical sketch by Carol L. Riley. Carol L. Riley is a personal friend of Virgil's, a white friend, and the historical sketch starts on page 105 and continues until page 142. It is in the historical sketch that you get most of the history of the Zuni, as opposed to the mostly personal account that you hear in the 104 pages that precede it. So overall, very fascinating work, and I have a personal attachment to the Zuni because I worked at that summer camp that I've talked about in so many other videos, and one of the benefits of working near to a lot of the pueblos and the Navajo reservation, especially for a company that takes its time to treat the local natives respectfully, is that they end up with a lot of contacts in the area. And in both 2018 and in 2019, when I worked there, we were invited as an organization, and however many students and campers that were there were invited to witness a rain dance. Zuni rain dances are invite only, and they happen in the central square, the central plaza that the main town in Zuni is centered around. It's not just a dance, it's a prayer. And in 2019, one of my coworkers, he is a yoga master, but he's also a teacher. And he and his wife are both from India and are very spiritually inclined. And so Tapan, in one part of the year, decided to give the staff an opportunity to participate in a more spiritual yoga session where we were trying to perform different poses while also listening to his chanting, which got us in a meditative state of mind. And I told him in 2019, when we went to see the Zuni rain dance, I pulled him aside and said, "You probably already know this, but the mood, the atmosphere at the rain dance felt very similar to the atmosphere of that session of meditation that he led us through." And he put it very succinctly, and I've used the word a couple times now to describe the rain dances, but he said, "It's a prayer." And that's what yoga was and yoga is to him, but it was also what the Zuni rain dance is to the Zuni. It is a solemn song and dance of prayer to their gods to bring rain to the Zuni people during the summer. And at the end of each dance, they do an act that is very similar to the way Catholics say Amen at the end of each prayer. It is not necessarily the same, but it is in the same spirit, so to speak. The Zuni gather their hands, bringing the air of the atmosphere of that dance to their lips, and then breathe in to breathe in the blessings of that dance. And it's really fascinating because it was a communal prayer. So many people were gathered around. There were women, men, children, older men and women, all gathered to be part of their community. And then afterwards, or before, depending on which year it was, the host that invited us gave us a chance to learn about their culture as well. And so certain questions were asked, including one that I recall, which was that someone asked if, as the Zuni people diminished due to disease and mistreatment by colonizers, were any clans lost? And what the answer we got was that yes, some clans and kivas have been lost in the last few centuries. Clan membership is passed down matrilineally. This clan is something sacred to them, just as these dances are sacred, just as their language is sacred, just as everyday life is sacred to the Zuni, so are their clans. Virgil discusses some of that in this book, and it's really fascinating. And the book was worth $20. That's how much I paid for it. I think realistically it is worth a lot more, just because the attachment I have to this state, to the people that inhabited this state before the Spanish, before the Americans got here. It is very informative. and it provides a very good firsthand view of their life and how they try to better themselves while also trying to remain rooted in tradition and culture. So I liked this book, A Zuni Life, a Pueblo Indian in Two Worlds, and I hope that if you pick this up, you will like it as well. That is A Zuni Life. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another book rant.